Have you ever felt like no one truly understands what's going on inside you? Like you've tried to explain what you're feeling, and no matter how carefully you choose your words, they never carry the real weight of what's happening within? Have you ever thought that maybe it's easier to stay silent than to repeat, one more time, something no one seems to truly hear? A lot of people shut down, not by choice, but because they've simply had enough. They're tired of being interrupted, of being misunderstood, of hearing advice that doesn't help at all. Tired of exposing their vulnerable sides only to see the other person change the subject, look away, or just ignore it. When that happens over and over again, something inside you begins to retreat. Slowly, you stop trying to be seen, and life goes on. You answer when you're asked something, do what needs to be done, meet what's expected of you. But that desire to express something that's truly yours begins to fade. You realize it's easier to seem okay than to try and explain what's wrong. Easier to smile than to say you're confused. Easier to fake strength than admit you're tired of not being understood. Over time, the distance between what you show and what you feel starts to grow. And the more it grows, the harder it gets to tell what's still real. At some point, you begin to doubt yourself. Are my feelings real? Am I overreacting? Is the problem me? That's where many people lose themselves. Not because of some dramatic decision, but because they've drifted a little further away from themselves every single day. And when they finally notice, they're living a quiet life with no room left for what's true. That's when the emptiness begins. When you stop trying to be understood and start just functioning. But even when everything seems to be in place, something feels missing. What's missing is you. When you stop being understood, you start protecting yourself. And the most common way to do that is by creating an image. Something others can easily accept. Something that looks right, calm, balanced. Even if none of it is actually true. You learn that showing too much is risky. So you show just enough. What pleases. What works. That image starts taking up space slowly. At first it feels like armor. It helps you avoid rejection, judgment, embarrassment. But over time, it becomes a kind of parallel identity. People begin to respond to this version you've built. And before you know it, you start acting in ways that keep that image alive. You care for it. You protect it. Even if it costs you something. Lacan wrote about this in his mirror stage theory. From a very young age, we learn to see ourselves from the outside, like someone looking at a reflection and thinking that's what truly exists. The image becomes the reference. And the problem is, if you stare at that reflection long enough, you eventually start believing it's really you, even when everything inside is falling apart. That's how we lose ourselves, trying to seem whole while we're in pieces, trying to appear calm while we're carrying a storm, trying to be accepted, even if that means erasing all the parts of us that are hard to show. The image you keep alive wasn't born from what you feel. It was shaped by what the world wanted to see. And now, maintaining that image takes effort. It demands silence. It requires you to drift further and further from what truly matters, yourself. But the most dangerous part is when the image doesn't just fool others, it fools you too. When you've been pretending to be strong for so long that you no longer allow yourself to fall apart. When you convince yourself you're fine simply because everyone else believes you are. That's when the emptiness starts to feel normal. But it's still there, and harder to ignore each day. After spending so much time living to keep an image intact, you start making choices based on it. Choices that don't come from within, but from what others expect of you. You accept situations that don't serve you, chase goals that don't fulfill you, enter relationships that don't reflect what you truly want. All without realizing you're moving further and further away from yourself. It's as if your desire is no longer your own. As if you've learned to want what looks right, what's admired, what seems worthy. But that, in practice, doesn't align with what you truly feel. Lacan said that a person's desire is the desire of the other. In other words, we don't desire what we actually want. We desire what we believe others want us to desire. It might sound confusing, but in real life, it shows up in simple ways. You work hard to have a body, a career, or a lifestyle that impresses people, that sparks comments, that wins applause. Even if it costs your health, your peace, or your sense of self. You want to be chosen, recognized, validated. And for that, you start wanting things that pull you away from your truth. At some level, this becomes automatic. You start following paths you can't even explain. Sometimes you even achieve what you set out to, and feel emptier than ever. Because you reached something that was never truly your own desire. It was just another attempt to please, to fit in, to prove you deserve to exist. And when that happens, the frustration hits. But along with it comes confusion. If I got what I always wanted, why am I not happy? The answer is painful. Maybe you've spent so long trying to be accepted that you forgot to listen to what you actually wanted. Maybe you never learned to desire from within, only as a reflection of what others value. That kind of distance wounds silently, because the world may think you're doing well, that you're on the right path, that you're winning. But inside, you feel disconnected from your own body, from your own life. To keep playing that character, you have to constantly hide parts of yourself. And at first it even seems to work. The mask helps you deal with others, be accepted, avoid conflict. It protects you. But over time, you realize you're trapped in it. You can't tell anymore where the real you ends and where the performance begins. Jung called this mask the persona, the social face we develop to navigate the world. It's important, it's useful, but it should never be confused with who we truly are. The problem is, when you live too long inside your persona, it starts taking over. It tells you how to behave, what you're allowed to say, what needs to stay hidden. And whatever remains of your true self begins to fade. The prison has no bars. No signs. It's invisible because it looks normal. You behave well, you're productive, you even seem happy. But inside, something is screaming. It feels like you're living out of obligation, following a script written by someone you don't even remember, yet you keep performing, as if it's your only option. When you begin to realize you're lost within yourself, the exhaustion hits. Playing a role that isn't yours, pretending to be someone who doesn't feel anything anymore, it takes a heavy toll. And the most painful part is that no one sees the effort. Because the mask is convincing. Only you know how much it weighs. Even if you want to drop everything and show your true self, fear holds you back. Fear of being rejected. Fear of disappointing people. Fear that, without the mask, maybe no one will stay. So you keep going. You get by. Until you forget that life could be lived another way. But deep down, you know. You didn't end up here by choice. You got here to protect yourself. The problem is, now that protection is suffocating you, and maybe what you need most is the courage to make space for what's been hidden for far too long. There comes a point when life turns into a sequence of tasks. You wake up, do what needs to be done, have just enough conversations, reply to messages, deliver results. From the outside, everything looks fine, but inside, you feel like you're just getting by, running on autopilot, trying to avoid collapse. You're functioning. And because of that, no one suspects anything. But functioning is not the same as living. Truly living requires presence, engagement, choice. It means feeling that what you do is somehow connected to who you are. When that link breaks, the body keeps moving, but meaning disappears. This disconnection is subtle. It doesn't explode, it seeps in slowly. You start forgetting what you like, what inspires you, what moves you inside. What used to define you begins to fade. What's left is just checking boxes, a constant attempt not to disappoint others, even though you've already let yourself down. Jung talked about this psychic split during the individuation process. When the ego separates from the self, a person begins to lose touch with what once made them feel alive. And this detachment doesn't hurt at first, but it corrodes you slowly. What starts as adaptation ends in erasure. The truth is, no one can live like this for long without consequences. Sooner or later, the body starts to protest. The mind refuses to keep going. Anxiety, apathy, insomnia, lack of motivation. They're all quiet ways of saying, you're here, but you're not in yourself. And it's exhausting. Because nothing wears you down more than being available for everything, except for what really matters, yourself. As time passes, you begin to realize that everything you've built, your actions, your choices, even your relationships, revolves around a common theme: the desire to be accepted, to be seen as someone trustworthy, interesting, balanced, someone others approve of, admire, like. But at some point, it starts to feel off, Because being accepted doesn't necessarily mean being whole. To be liked, you hide pain, delay desires, shrink your boundaries. And often, by the time you notice, you've already forgotten what you truly feel, sacrificing your truth to maintain appearances. All just to keep up the image of someone easy to deal with, someone who doesn't complicate things, someone who's always fine. But that kind of acceptance comes at a high price. Lacan explained that people would rather be desired than be authentic, because being desired provides a sense of belonging. And when the need to belong is stronger than the courage to be real, we mold ourselves, adapt, stay silent. But that doesn't come without consequences. The cost of forced acceptance is the loss of wholeness. You become only a part of who you are, a convenient slice. And the worst part is that even after doing everything to be accepted, you still feel like you're never enough. Because deep down, what others are validating isn't you. It's your performance, your ability to conform. And the more you conform, the further you drift from your own feelings. This vicious cycle deepens as you continue to disconnect from yourself, without even noticing how far you're moving from your essence. Until one day, you look at yourself and recognize nothing. You don't know if you love what you do, if you love who's beside you, if you're where you're supposed to be. You start questioning what really matters, but feel trapped in the reflection you've created, unsure of who you really are. And when that happens, the feeling is like being present in everything, but absent from yourself. You're there, but not whole. Playing a role, but without truth. It drains you, as if what really matters is slipping away. When everything starts to collapse inside, the first reaction is to search for answers. You want to understand yourself. You want to know why you feel this way, why you always seem distant from yourself, even when you try to do everything right. And that's when many people begin a search for self-knowledge. Not always with the clarity that the answer isn't found in perfection, but in the acceptance of imperfection. You read books, watch videos, take personality tests, seek out content on identity and purpose. And for a while it even seems to help. The ideas make sense. The descriptions match. You start to believe that maybe, finally, you're understanding who you are. But after a while, the same emptiness returns. The same sense of being lost. And you realize that despite all the knowledge, you still can't feel whole. That's because, in many cases, self-discovery becomes just another way to fit in. You're not really searching for yourself. You're searching for a version of yourself that others will also accept. You want to understand your traits, but only to be more likable, more agreeable, more palatable, instead of simply being. Jung spoke of individuation as a deep dive, not into ready-made answers, but into the unknown. A path that demands facing what's been repressed, what hurts, what's not beautiful or easy to accept. But today, people often seek a kind of shallow, quick self-knowledge, just to feel better without actually confronting what needs to change. The search for self becomes a trap when it tries to avoid pain. Because without pain, there is no truth. And without truth, all you've done is swap one mask for another. A prettier one, maybe a more conscious one, but still just an image. That's why, even after all the effort to find yourself, you might still feel more lost than ever. Because finding yourself isn't about defining yourself clearly. It's about listening to yourself with courage. And that doesn't always bring immediate comfort. But it does bring something even more important. The ability to accept pain as part of your path. Perhaps one of the most painful experiences is realizing that, even when surrounded by people, you've never truly felt loved for who you are. They loved your politeness, your strength, your availability, your calm. They loved the easy parts, predictable, useful, manageable. But what was kept inside, what was confusing, intense, fragile, that rarely had any space. And the absence of space for your truth creates a deep disconnection from who you are. Little by little, you learn to hide not just what you feel, but the one who feels. You begin to see yourself as someone who must always stay in control, to the point of denying what's genuine inside you. As if your very essence were a problem to be fixed, rather than a presence to be welcomed. And that kind of lesson doesn't always come from people's words, but from their gestures, from the disinterest, from the coldness, from the silence you feel when you need most to be heard. Lacan would say the subject alienates himself in order to be desired. In other words, You disconnect from yourself just to stay close to others. You trade truth for belonging. And in the beginning, it seems to work. But soon you realize that you're surrounded, yet still feel invisible. Jung spoke of the shadow as everything that's been rejected, not only by others, but by you too. The side of you that was hidden away because it was too much. And that hiding place becomes a habit. You protect yourself from everything that doesn't seem to fit in the world. But over time, you forget what you're even hiding. All you feel is the weight of carrying parts of yourself that were neglected. That's how the shame of simply existing begins. A quiet, nearly invisible shame, but a constant one. You start to feel inadequate for feeling too much, for thinking differently, for not fitting into the dynamics that others seem to navigate so easily. And to survive, you begin to shape-shift. You begin to disappear. But you can't live fully when half of you is buried in the dark corners of your own mind. And as hard as it is to face, there comes a point when hiding stops being protection and becomes a prison. Eventually, the structure starts to crack. The image you've held up for so long can't hold itself anymore. The mask begins to fall apart. The routine that once felt manageable becomes suffocating. The relationships you kept out of habit no longer make sense. And suddenly, you find yourself in the middle of a crisis. Maybe it starts as a lingering sadness. Maybe it shows up as deep exhaustion, as random irritability, as anxiety that grows even when everything seems calm. Or maybe it comes all at once, a breakup, a loss, a full-blown emotional collapse. However it arrives, the crisis comes. And when it does, it's not just an end. It's a signal that something inside you is ready to be renewed. What looks like the end, where everything falls apart, may actually be the beginning. The start of the breakdown of the character you built to survive. The beginning of a rupture with the false image that's occupied your place for too long. Jung referred to the dark night of the soul as an inevitable step in the individuation process. The moment when the ego can no longer keep control and the unconscious begins demanding attention to what has been ignored for too long. Yes, it's painful, but it's necessary. Because only when the character begins to fall apart can the true self finally have space to emerge. The crisis isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you're being called to let go of something that no longer serves you. It's your limit saying, enough. And it's at this very point that, for the first time, you have the opportunity to choose a different path. But to do that, you need to stop resisting. You need to face the discomfort as part of the process. You need to allow the pain to reveal what has been hidden. Because it's right there, in the middle of collapse, that the opportunity to rebuild begins. Not a new image, but a new presence. Not the character, but the truth. When everything falls apart, what's left is a space that's hard to name. It's not quite sadness. It's something deeper. An emptiness that can't be explained. An internal silence larger than any pain. And the immediate instinct is to fill it. With distractions, with answers, with certainty. Anything to bring back a sense of control. But not every void is a problem to be solved. Sometimes, it's a signal. Lacan spoke of the real as something beyond language. Something that challenges us to stop and connect with what's truly alive within us. And that's exactly how this emptiness feels. It can't be explained. It can only be felt. We try to run from it because it asks too much. It asks for presence. It asks for listening. It asks for stillness. It disrupts the shallow rhythm of life. It forces you to pause, to look, to question. And that's scary, because to face it, you'd have to stop everything you're doing and turn inward. Maybe what remains is the first truth you were never taught to hear. You are here. And being here, without needing to be anything more than that, is harder than it seems. The emptiness isn't a hole to be quickly filled with easy answers or quick fixes. It's the place where illusions fall, and where something new can finally begin. It's in that space where the possibility of reconnection lives. Because, for the first time, you're not trying to please anyone, or live up to expectations, or fit in. You're simply trying to feel what exists, as it is, without rushing to change it. It might seem like a dark place, and it is, but it's also a true place. And when you allow yourself to remain there, without rushing out, without trying to make sense of it right away, something inside you begins to reorganize. Not through effort, but through presence. For a long time, you believed that to feel better, you had to find answers, to know exactly who you are, to know what you want, to know where you went wrong and how to fix it. But maybe the relief you're looking for doesn't lie in the answers. Maybe it lives in genuine presence, in simply being with yourself. True presence. Not that anxious kind of attention that's just trying to fix everything right away, but a calm, honest listening, where you allow yourself to feel without judgment, without the rush to get out of the hard phase, where you don't need to define yourself to respect yourself, where you're allowed to exist, even without all the certainty. Jung spoke of the self as a living totality, not a fixed concept. And to live from the self is not to understand everything about yourself. It's to accept that, despite the pain and uncertainty, you are whole anyway. It's being able to feel anger while still respecting yourself. It's being lost and still listening to yourself. The urge to understand every detail of your pain might just be another way to avoid feeling it, because feeling hurts. And maybe what you need now isn't more explanation, but the capacity to be with what hurts, with true presence. The only thing your most forgotten part needs is presence. You, with yourself. No rush to figure everything out. Just the willingness to never abandon yourself again. After so many attempts to define yourself, maybe you'll realize that no word can fully capture who you are. No label, no formula, no personality test, because the truth about who you are isn't something static. It reveals itself in moments of deep acceptance. There will be days when you feel strong, others fragile. You'll love and then doubt. You'll open up and then want to retreat. None of that means you're doing it wrong. It means you're allowing yourself to live in the flow of life with all its nuances. The truth about you isn't found in a concept. It's in what you feel when you stop hiding. It's in the small reactions you try to control. It's in the sensitivity you've judged too harshly, in the intuition you learned to ignore. But that's always been there. And that's why the only truth that matters is the one you allow yourself to feel, even if you don't know how to explain it. Jung once said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." You don't need to force healing. You need to allow space for it to happen. And that space begins the moment you stop fighting yourself. By now, maybe you've realized that you're not broken. You're just tired of abandoning yourself. The pain you feel isn't a flaw. It's the cry of a part of you that's been forgotten for too long, waiting for you, not to be fixed, but to be welcomed. You no longer need to chase an ideal version of yourself. You don't need to keep reshaping yourself to fit. What you need, and have always needed, is to learn how to inhabit who you are, even with doubts, flaws, and confusion, because it's in that imperfect place that your truth lives. To inhabit yourself doesn't mean to isolate yourself. It means returning inward with the courage to stay. It means no longer treating yourself like a stranger. It means beginning to care for yourself as if you were someone worthy of your own time, your own attention, your own presence. And you are. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay with me for the next video.